So following Kevin Owens versus Sami Zayn, which was going to be a very difficult match to surpass, we had the Intercontinental Championship being defended. The Miz versus Cesaro. And unfortunately, once again, Hulu cut out the majority of this storyline, or it took place on SmackDown, so I can't really judge it. I thought it was very strange that they put the belt on The Miz, because even though I actually think Miz is a very underutilized talent within the WWE roster, he doesn't win very often anymore. And when Zack Ryder won the belt at WrestleMania, I was like, oh my god, this is seriously happening. But then Zack Ryder, to his credit, won me over the following Raw with a very passionate promo where he thanked everybody involved. And then, of course, he immediately loses the belt, loses the rematch, and so has fallen out of the championship scene once more, making his victory that much more pointless. But The Miz got the belt, and Cesaro became the #1 contender, which I fully support. Cesaro's return, I thought, was very well handled, and he immediately gained quite a bit of momentum, and I could see him winning this belt and becoming a very important person within the WWE, and not just talent enhancement like he has been used, unfortunately. So the match was fine. It wasn't great. It seemed like there were some awkward spots where, I don't want to go so far as saying a botch, but something didn't look quite as cool as it was supposed to. There's this weird spot where Cesaro just kind of lifts up The Miz, and The Miz just kind of lays there dormantly, even though he wasn't hurt. He was perfectly active until Cesaro grabbed him and just held him under his arm. It would have made more sense for Miz to be like struggling and stuff like that, but not. He just was content to ragdoll himself in Cesaro's powerful arms. But it at least moved at a fast pace. Cesaro is always entertaining to watch in the ring. And even though The Miz isn't his ideal opponent, I will give credit to The Miz for keeping up. This moved at a very quick pace. However, the big problem with this match, besides the fact that The Miz won, is Kevin Owens is talking on commentary, because he has stated his intentions to pursue this championship next, since he defeated Sami Zayn. Okay, that only led to more of my belief that Cesaro would get the belt, even though I wasn't sure I wanted to see another program between these two so shortly after their last one. But Sami Zayn attacks Kevin Owens, and that leads to a four-way brawl. And it seemed like the Kevin Owens versus Sami Zayn storyline upstaged this title defense, made Cesaro and especially The Miz seem a little irrelevant, which is unfortunate, but at the same time, I don't think many people were interested in the Miz Cesaro program, and if they were, it was primarily because they are currently interested in Cesaro. But I will admit that a four-way battle between these men for the Intercontinental Championship is much more compelling, at least on paper, than just The Miz versus Cesaro. So we'll see what happens next. But that was, I think, a problem with this bout, even though it was still a solid match. Nothing for anybody involved to be ashamed of, for sure. Following this, it's Chris Jericho versus Dean Ambrose. I actually enjoyed this storyline. I think Jericho is at his most entertaining while he's a heel, and Ambrose actually was very funny when hosting his Ambrose Asylum show. Their interactions were very enjoyable because they have good chemistry, and the writing actually benefited them for once. Jericho, for some reason, usually is the victim of some of the worst promo writing ever. I haven't seen this since he's become a heel, but as a babyface, his promos are very hit or miss. But since he's become a villain, I'm perfectly happy with the material he's been given to work with. And Ambrose has been given some good stuff too. So this actually ended up being a really good match too, even though Not everybody seems to have liked it as much as I did, but I think this was given a lot more time to be fleshed out because of Enzo's injury, but for whatever reason, they told a real compelling story in the ring, and I ended up getting really hooked into it to the point where I almost stopped critiquing it and just started being a fan, a mark. Somebody who could just enjoy the match for what it was. I really wanted to see Ambrose win, and I really hated that dastardly heel Jericho. That is why in my written version of this review, it's a lot shorter than the others. It's because I didn't really take any notes while I was watching it. I was just like, oh, get him, Ambrose, get him. And it's really cool when wrestling can bring that out of you, when you stop being such a critic and just become a casual viewer who is invested in these characters. So this was some great work, great pacing, good maneuvers. The match was, I think, probably Ambrose's the first really good match I've seen from him in a long time. I would have to say at the absolute least it's on par with the best bouts between Jericho and AJ Styles. I actually think, though, that Jericho should have been the one to fight Roman Reigns for the championship at Payback, just because it seemed like Jericho going over AJ Styles actually meant something, and that could have propelled him once more into the main event scene, but now he's already becoming the talent enhancement that he was prior, so that was kind of a waste, and we'll come back to that later, but still, I end up liking this program, and I thought it was a really good match. The Women's Championship, Natalya versus Charlotte. I hated the storyline. For one, Natalya has not been booked to be a credible #1 contender. I was fine with her getting that shot at Roadblock because of the crowd, but otherwise, I always considered those specials to be just sort of specials. You don't really need anything else preceding them, and they don't really need to be commented on following them. But Natalya, for the most part, has been used as a jobber who generally loses very quickly to the people who would go on to face Charlotte. So for her to suddenly be there, in a way, it's even more distracting than Brie Bella suddenly becoming the #1 contender, because at least Brie, because she was apparently retiring, it made sense to give her that one last shot. Furthermore, Brie actually does win a fair amount on the lower end shows like Superstars and Main Event. Maybe Natalya has been given a lot of victories, but it seems like whenever I see Natalya, she's losing to the likes of Paige or somebody who's about to become important. But still, this actually ended up being a good match, even though actually I forgot. The worst part of this storyline was how, even though this is about the Women's Championship, or it's supposed to be about the Women's Championship, not only that, but it's the newly minted Women's Championship. They have gotten rid of the term diva. They are building up the female competitors as legit wrestlers. So yeah, let's make it more about the men and their lives. More specifically, Ric Flair and Bret Hart, these ladies' mentors. And their presence is a distraction from the actual ladies themselves. Now, Ric Flair, to a point, I was fine with him being there, and I guess I understand, Natalya bringing in Bret Hart to sort of even up the odds, but once again, this is supposed to be the first major women's championship feud. If you want to make this belt important, focus more on the women themselves, not the men. But the match actually was pretty good. I liked it. It, in a lot of ways, reminded me how disappointing it is that Natalya has been wasted in this role, because she is a really good wrestler. She deserves a lot more than what she's been given. It seems like the last time she really had momentum was when they were doing that thing with Tyson Kidd where it seemed like they might break up. And I remember Natalya was showing like a lot more attitude. She had those cool like shoulder pads. I thought she looked so badass, and I was always interested to see her wrestle. Unfortunately, it seemed like they killed her momentum for whatever reason, and I guess they decided to focus more on Tyson Kidd and Cesaro as a team than just Natalya breaking away and becoming, you know, a strong, empowered woman. But she is really good, and she deserves better than this. And Charlotte is very athletic, and she, I thought, held up her end of this match pretty well too, even though Natalya certainly was the one who was carrying it. But it was a good match up until the ending, where they decided to redo the Montreal Screwjob. Unfortunately, I hated how it played out. It's only there for nostalgia purposes, and it made no sense. Why would the ref suddenly take Charlotte's side? What is the story here? Will they explain that in following episodes of Raw? I presume so, but it just seemed very lazy the way it played out. So shit finish, but pretty good match. That actually, even though the crowd occasionally got distracted and occasionally became hostile, they were mostly respectful. And I think the match kind of exceeded all of our expectations. So following this, now Vince McMahon comes out, and he's going to decide who runs Raw. So after WrestleMania, Shane started running Raw. And this made no sense because the whole point of his WrestleMania match was that if he lost, he would not be given power. So I hate it when they just kind of overwrite the storylines and render previous stipulations pointless. So even though the Raws themselves were pretty good, and I think people liked seeing a babyface authority figure for once, it didn't make sense for Vince to be this generous. And once again, the whole WrestleMania match was apparently pointless. Stephanie did come back, though, and Vince said that he would choose between them at Payback. So this segment went on way too long, in my opinion. The crowd got bored. They became hostile. I got bored. I didn't really become hostile, but I will at least admit that everybody involved played their parts very well. There were no major flubs in any of their speeches. You know, Stephanie, even though I'm tired of her, she is a great talker who can really make you hate her. Shane's been doing good as the more noble and admirable of the McMahons, and Vince McMahon, I thought, did a great job at kind of going back and forth in between. He sometimes would pander to the crowd and other times would berate them. But still, it was just too long, and the decision to put them both in charge is okay. We'll just have to see where it goes. But it is kind of just same shit we've seen in the past. But I guess I'd rather that than just him saying, okay, Stephanie, the authority's back in power. And if he just chose Shane, that wouldn't make a whole lot of sense either. So this was probably the best decision. And finally, do we have time? No, we don't. So the final video will focus on the World Heavyweight Championship match, so stay tuned.